Lexus presents tennis on Sky Sports.
Daniel Kahn is in New York for Sky Sports News. What a night, what an occasion, what an achievement.
I mean, words don't really do it justice, do it? I mean, Jack Draper, his first ever Grand Slam quarterfinal. He's now going to play in his first ever Grand Slam semi-final. I mean, I think there were a lot of questions how would Jack Draper really face the Arthur Ashe atmosphere. You know, the first time he's ever played that against the 10th seed in the world, and Alex de Minaur. And I think, as Jack Draper alluded to, there was a lot of talk just before the match that perhaps Minaur was struggling with a bit of illness. Of course, we know about his hip injury that he had earlier this year as well. However, I mean, he still was very, very good, Alex de Minaur, and Jack Draper was just on another level. I mean, just going through the match a little bit, I think the first set was especially important. Jack Draper had 6 set points to put it away, and you kind of thought, is he going to get over the line for that first set? Mentally, you think that was a huge moment in the match, and he was able to do that. The second set, a lot tighter, 7-5. Again, you thought Jack Draper could have put him away a bit earlier, but Alex de Minaur showed his class, hit a number of very classy winners. But then in the third set, I also think physicality did play a point, because Alex de Minaur came into this one playing 4.5 hours more to this point than Jack Draper had. And I think we saw that in the decisive set, because Jack Draper just ran away with it. His forehand is one of the best things to watch in the flesh, I have to say. It was the way he rips his forehand, Alex de Minaur can keep up with it. And as I mentioned, I mean, Jack Draper now into his first Grand Slam semi-final. And let's just give it a little bit more context, because we saw the celebrations there. But I mean, this time last year, he'd just come off the back of 6 months on and off with a shoulder injury. He was 123rd in the world. But now, look at him just enjoying the celebrations. He's had a brilliant year, becoming the British #1, winning his first ATP event, and now just enjoying that Arthur Ashe crowd. And you know, remember, this is the biggest court of any Grand Slam, over 23,000 capacity, and Jack Draper's putting a performance that any seasoned pro would be proud of. So I mean, he'll be proud, his family will be proud, but I think after the journey he's been on, this will feel extremely special. And just a few statistics to just throw out there, maybe perhaps good omens. I mean, Daniil Medvedev was the last man to win or to not lose a set and reach the semi-finals. That was in 2020, just putting into a bit of context how impressive Jack Draper's done to win 15 sets in a row. And also the last player to win in that process of winning 15, of course he had to win 14 sets in a row. The last player to do that at the US Open was Emma Raducanu in 2021. And we all know how that ended, so perhaps a good omen for Jack Draper.
Absolutely, Dan. Look, as you said, he played such composed tennis, didn't he, on such a big stage. And we need to remind everyone, at the age of 22, and without pumping up his tyres too much, I mean, you mentioned Emma Raducanu there, but you get the impression, Dan, that this is a real superstar in the making.
Absolutely, and I think when you look at the aspects of Jack Draper's game, you know, you look at the weapons he has, his forehand, his serve especially, are so powerful for any player to deal with. I mean, I saw him, you know, serve 125 miles an hour. I mean, not many players are going to be able to return that accurately anyway. And I think, especially when you look at this US Open already, big players have been knocked out. Carlos Alcaraz, who won this a few years ago, is out. Novak Djokovic, the defending champion, is also out. So it does feel like there's a big opportunity for Jack Draper here, especially going into the semi-finals, because we'll see in the evening session tonight, Jannik Sinner, who's an Australian Open champion from earlier this year, he's going to take on a former US Open champion in Daniil Medvedev. So you think that's going to be a really tough match for both players. So perhaps that will help Jack Draper going into the semi-finals. But I think let's just remind ourselves, Jack Draper, who was 123rd in the world at this point last year, is into his first ever Grand Slam semi-final. And I think off this win, he'll find himself in the top 20 players in the world with the rankings as well.
Don't want to dampen the mood, maybe just to manage expectations. Two points to make. One, it wasn't the highest quality match, 30 unforced errors from each player, Dan. And the other thing that you might worry about is this strapping, a lot of it around the thigh that Draper had put on during the match and obviously walked off with. So there'd be just a couple of things maybe to temper all the glory that we're feeling at the moment.
Look, I'm half cup full. You know me. I'm optimistic. However, I think they are fair points, aren't they? I mean, I think from what I saw in terms of the strapping, it did look like it was already strapped and perhaps it was just being restrapped by the doctor. But we'll have to wait and see. I'm sure he'll be asked about that in his news conference. He'll get an update on that, whether it's something to worry about. I also think, it's his first semi-final, so he hasn't been this far in a Grand Slam before. So how's his body going to take that mentally, physically? How's he going to find this experience? We'll wait and find out. However, we heard Jack Draper there after the match. I mean, he's a very calm, composed person. After the performance he's just shown, yes, as you mentioned, there were a few errors, but Jack Draper wasn't kind of hiding that in the sense he was recognising that Alex de Minaur perhaps wasn't at his best, perhaps understandable as well. However, all you can do is, of course, it's cliche to say, is beat what's in front of you. And Jack Draper, through each stage of this US Open, has been able to do that. And these two matches, Thomas match in the previous round, and now Alex de Minaur, who, remember, head-to-head, he'd lost the last 3 previous meetings against, has shown, I would argue, incredible mental resilience. And I think something he's probably worked himself on quite a lot over the last few years, for sure.